Hello, this is Matthew Fox. I'm joined by my co host for today, Andy Nelson. And in just a few minutes, you're going to hear an episode we recorded a few weeks ago about the ethics of awards shows. At the time we recorded that, that seemed like a pretty general question. And we were talking about things like who gets to pick, who gets nominated, and what does the word best mean when it comes to best actor or best picture or best costumes. And we were kind of talking in fairly general terms. Since in between that time when we recorded and now when you're hearing it because it's gone live, obviously there has been a fairly specific ethical controversy that's happened regarding an award show, BAFTA, the British Academy of
Film and Television Arts.
The British Academy of Film and Television Awards. Thank you. And I felt like, if nothing else, if you read the title, Ethics in Award Shows, and we didn't talk about that, it would feel kind of weird. But also, it just seemed like a good topic for us to dive into. So let me kind of give a quick summary, and I'll try not to editorialize too much, but it'll probably give you an idea of where I feel on this, and then let Andy jump in, and we'll just bat it back and forth a few minutes, and then get you to the main episode we recorded. So for anyone who hasn't heard about this or hasn't heard the full story, one of the films that was being talked about at the BAFTAs was, do you have the name of that film?
I Swear.
I Swear, by John Davidson, right?
He wasn't the director. He's the producer on it, and it's based on his life. Correct.
One of the films that was being talked about and honored at the BAFTA Awards was a documentary called I Swear.
No, it's a feature film. It's a narrative based on his life.
Right, let me do that one more time.
Yeah.
So for anybody who hasn't heard the story or doesn't know the full story, one of the films that was being nominated and talked about a lot at the BAFTAs is called I Swear, which is a film based on the life of someone with Tourette syndrome. And the real life person who was an executive producer of this film and had been very involved in it, who has himself Tourette's, is named John Davidson. Now, he was going to be at the award show, and he has the tics that he has with Tourette's get a lot worse when he is in high stress situations. I don't have Tourette's, but I have some emotional and physical tics, and so I can certainly understand that. And frankly, being in a room with some of the biggest celebrities in the world where your life on film is being discussed, that's a pretty high stress situation. He knew he would probably be ticking somewhat, and that he does verbally tick and say things that can be really offensive to people that he absolutely does not mean. And so he had specifically requested that he be seated pretty far back. And to his knowledge, he was ticking throughout the show. Most people were not hearing what he had to say, and certainly it wasn't going on television. Until when Michael B. Jordan and John
Delroy Lindo.
Thank you. Until when Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, two black actors from the film Sinners, which won a lot of awards, were on stage, and he shouted out the N-word. And he immediately saw the two actors respond quite viscerally, as you can imagine in such a moment. And he pretty quickly said, I need to get out of here. I don't want to be here if people are hearing the kind of things I'm saying, because he didn't want to be hurting people. What he later found out was that there had been a microphone placed near him, which was picking these things up. And that while a lot of them were edited out for the broadcast, including him at one point saying Free Palestine and some other stuff that he did or did not mean, whatever it was, this one specific thing was left in. Even though Warner Brothers, which was a part of the broadcasting team, had specifically said to the BAFTAs, "Hey, we're editing that out, right? That's not something we want going out on our going out."
And to be clear, they had a 2-hour window of time before it aired.
Right. This isn't like a 30-second delay or something where someone had to be really quick. They had 2 hours to do all this. And so, as you can predict on the internet, a lot of people got upset for very legitimate reasons about the racism of someone using that term. Some had a nuanced take about it and understanding of Tourette's. Others did not. Other people in the Tourette's community started responding to that. And we had a whole bunch of ableism and racism charges being thrown back and forth, which more recently have become kind of a lot more people kind of realizing, like, look, we have two marginalized communities that are being pitted against each other, when really what we should be talking about is the BAFTAs kind of using this to generate controversy and to exploit all of these folks. I guess I am just straight up editorializing here, but in a way that's caused us all to say the word BAFTAs a lot more times than any of us ever thought. And So yeah, Andy, what give us your take?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack. I definitely think it's completely fair to recognize the two sides of this. I think
Right.
for John Davidson, who has dealt with Tourette's through his entire life, he understands and is frustrated and appalled by some of the things that he says and has had to deal with that his whole life. And it's a very difficult thing. He's come out and, he reached out to Warner Brothers, which, released Sinners, so that he could get in touch with Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo to let them know, right, I meant nothing by this. It's just this thing that I have no control over. He said pedophile at one point to Alan Cumming, a comment that Alan Cumming made, who is a gay actor and was hosting, and he was making a joke about Paddington and bringing home Peruvian bears of his own, right, and John Davidson threw out pedophile. And so the N-word situation is the one that people are gravitating to, specifically because it didn't get edited out. Like, there were a lot of other things that he was saying, and that's, I think, what's frustrating. And it's hard because, like, that's the one side of this situation is understanding how somebody with Tourette's speaks and just trying to figure out how to cognitively deal with that, right, when somebody is saying things that can hugely offend you, knowing that it's not necessarily something that they're intending at all, right? On the flip side of that is the African American community, of which there were many in the crowd, not just because of Sinners, but One Battle After Another certainly has its share, and aside from all sorts of other categories. But to have that shouted out already is going to be creating a very difficult situation for all of them, because it's creating a situation of discomfort. And I think what ended up making it worse, and just speaking specifically to the actual ceremony for a moment, is when they had Alan Cumming come out afterward and kind of create a reply that they put together. It wasn't very strong. Mm-hmm. And it was like, if somebody was offended, we hope that you'll understand. And right, people are like, people are offended, and you need to be a little cleaner with how you're addressing that. And then after it was over, the BAFTAs, their response also was light, and it wasn't as strong as it needed to be. I don't think I would agree with you that the BAFTAs were doing any of this just to get people saying BAFTAs more and to keep their name in the conversation, because it's terrible news for them all around. Right. They've already had a board member, like one of the prominent African-American board members, resign because of it, and because of how they're dealing with and have dealt with the situation. And so I don't think it's something that they intended. I just think, I don't know. I think that they were trying to respond in a way that reflected a sympathy for John Davidson and the Tourette's community, without recognizing as importantly as they needed to what they needed to really be saying about the people who were actually on the receiving end.
Yeah, I can understand that. Things like placing a microphone near him when they had specifically told him they wouldn't do that. The fact that it was that one thing that was not edited out. It's hard for me to think that this was not intentional and not in some way. And I think it may have backfired on them. It's hard for me to think that there wasn't some attempt to get people talking about the BAFTAs is obviously very cynical, maybe to start an interesting conversation or something like that. It may be right. It may be just that this was a series of unfortunate coincidental mistakes that all lined up to create this kind of perfect storm of controversy.
Well, and to be clear, I mean, they do put microphones all around the auditorium. Like, they're not on every table, but they're on a bunch of tables, so they can capture live sound and all of that sort of stuff. But yes, they should have really thought more clearly about having one in front of John, because that seemed like a terrible place.
Well, and
to
clearly
put
John
one.
didn't know that it was there. I think is to me more the point. And so,
No, yeah,
yeah.
right.
But I do also agree with you there about and I think this there's an interesting conversation to be had here about intent versus harm, and and that I think is the other thing that you're right that the BAFTAs kind of didn't really understand. And I'm not I don't have Tourette's. I'm not black. I believe the same is both those things are true about you as well, Andy.
Yes.
And I'm going to use a very imperfect metaphor that is not the same, but is one that I keep thinking about, which is that early in the time after I lost my leg and I was using a wheelchair, I wound up going to I had a lot of trouble because I was new to it. I hadn't used it before. I got a pretty terrible one from the hospital. Um, and early on, I wound up going to a hotel that had advertised itself as disability accessible. Turned out it was actually a very old elevator, the kind where you enter all the way on one side and have to make a sharp turn to get in and get out of it. Long story short, one day when I was trying to use the elevator, I wound up kind of jerking around and knocking down an old person who was trying to get in. Happily, he wasn't harmed, in a kind of serious way. He was, sore, like nothing broke or anything, but he was pretty angry about it. And I've always remembered that as a time when, yes, it was my fault in a way that it is not there were voluntary actions I was taking, and that separates it from what John Davidson did. Absolutely. But certainly it was a time where I was doing everything I could to avoid causing harm, where the ableism of the world around me was making it a lot more likely I would cause harm. And yet none of those things made it any less harmful to the person who I hurt. And my only point with the metaphor there being that I think that it sounds like BAFTAs and some of that response was, well, if you know that the word wasn't said intentionally, especially now that we tell you hours later that he's apologizing and all this, should it not be much of a big deal? And I think that's where the conversation of, yeah, I don't think it was this guy's fault at all. And whatever the microphone situation was, all of that, but still two black men on stage at one of the pinnacles of their career, hearing this incredibly insulting, degrading word being thrown at them, of course they're going to be upset. Of course it's going to hit them hard. And I don't mean to speak for them, but I think that's what the BAFTAs really missed in what Cummings said soon after, and in the response they put out not long after that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's why their jury member resigned,
right.
Also because of the way that they handled it. It just wasn't providing, creating a safe space for the members of the black creative community.
Right.
And I think it's tricky because I think a lot of it is also, we're for so many people still in a learning zone where people are trying to figure out where's the line? What do I need to do here? And I think inevitably people make mistakes. And I think in so many ways, it's really unfortunate that the people running the show for the BAFTAs didn't have a handle on that.
Yeah.
And knowing that John was going to be a prominent figure in the auditorium, they really needed to have a better handle on what to expect, how to be prepared, what they should be bleeping, and just all of that stuff, so that they could have run this more smoothly. And I just don't think, I don't think that they clearly had a handle on it, and that's the unfortunate situation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good description, and I think that's I can understand people wanting to look at John and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this is it's not your fault, but it's not something you're doing, but it's on you to be aware of, the harm it could cause to others." But I think this is a situation where John really tried to work with BAFTA, saying please seat me in the back, please. He did not expect that his words were going to be heard up on stage, let alone be broadcast to so many other people who are going to be hurt and upset by that world, particularly black people, but of all backgrounds. So yeah, I think it's a good summary of where this all winds up.
Yeah, and if anything, since then, I know it's created a huge outpouring of support for Michael B. Jordan, Delroy Lindo, Hannah Beachler, anyone else who had been involved in Sinners who was there, and any of the other African American creative community who was there. Mm-hmm. And just watching also, I think there's been a big outpouring of love and support that I think has helped, that we have seen in all of the other awards shows that have played since then. And I think
Yeah.
so that if there's anything, that's been a benefit, that we're at least showing that there's a lot of support out there for
Yeah.
all of this.
Definitely. I will just add in closing that I've been learning a lot more about the situation by listening to creators, particularly Black creators and creators with Tourette's, and some folks who are Black and have Tourette's. And I'll be linking some of those TikToks that I've been finding in the show notes, because I do think that that's, you know, me and Andy have our thoughts on it. And since we're about to talk about the ethics of award shows, it felt important we comment on it. But obviously, people who are more connected to the situation and have direct thoughts on it, I think are, you know, take their word a lot more strongly than mine or Andy's. So I'm having Andy. Andy, any last things you want to add before we wrap up?
Nope. I think that's all on this point, but there's plenty to come.
Definitely. All right. Now back to really important questions. Now back to some other questions, like when someone says best song in a when someone says best song in a movie, do they mean the best song or the song that best fit the movie? All that and more right after this.
Awesome.